There are thousands of shipwrecks scattered across the ocean floor, and for most of them, if you have the right training, the right certification, and the right gear, you can actually go down and see them for yourself. Divers visit old wrecks all the time. It's a whole hobby, a whole industry. But a small handful of warship wrecks are different. You could have every certification in the world, the best equipment money can buy, and a boat ready to go, and you would still not be allowed anywhere near them. Not because of the depth, not because of the danger, because the law itself says no. These ships aren't just wrecks anymore. Legally, they are graves, and in some cases, crime scenes frozen in time. Today, we're counting down 5 warship wrecks that are completely off limits to the public, why they ended up that way, and the last one on this list is so protected that even the country that owns it can barely touch it. Before we get into the list, it helps to understand why this even happens. Most countries have some version of a law protecting military wrecks, especially ones where people died. In the United Kingdom, it's called the Protection of Military Remains Act. In the United States, wrecks like these often fall under a mix of National Historic Landmark status and direct Navy jurisdiction. The idea is simple. If a ship sank with its crew still inside, disturbing that wreck isn't just illegal, it's treated the same as disturbing a cemetery. And once a wreck gets that status, diving without a license isn't a fine, it's a criminal offence. Keep that in mind as we go through this list because every single one of these ships earned that protection the same way. People died on board, and in most cases, a lot of them. Number 5 is HMS Vanguard, sitting quietly in the cold, dark waters of Scapa Flow in Scotland. Scapa Flow was the main anchorage of the British Grand Fleet during the First World War, a huge natural harbour where dozens of warships would sit at anchor between operations. Vanguard was one of them, a St. Vincent-class battleship that had actually already served at the Battle of Jutland the year before without any serious damage. Then, on the 9th of July, 1917, while anchored with the rest of the fleet, doing nothing more dangerous than routine maintenance, one of her ammunition magazines detonated without warning. There was no enemy attack, no torpedo, no mine. The explosion was so violent it broke the ship apart in seconds, and she sank almost instantly, taking somewhere around 840 men down with her. Only a tiny handful of sailors survived. To this day, the official cause is believed to be unstable cordite propellant that had degraded in the ship's magazines, but nobody knows for certain. It remains one of the deadliest accidental disasters in the entire history of the Royal Navy, deadlier in terms of lives lost than most actual battles. Because of the scale of loss, and because so many bodies were never recovered, Vanguard is now a protected military remains site. Diving on her, or even anchoring too close, is treated as a criminal offence unless you hold a special licence, and those are almost never granted. She rests largely undisturbed today, rarely surveyed, rarely even photographed, a battleship that never fired a shot in anger, and is now one of the most tightly protected graves in British waters. Number 4 takes us out of the North Sea and into the Baltic, to the wreck of the Wilhelm Gustloff. This one didn't start life as a warship at all. She was built in 1937 as a German cruise liner designed for a Nazi state tourism program that was supposed to let ordinary German workers take affordable vacations. By the end of the Second World War, she'd been repurposed, first as a floating barracks, then pressed into service as an evacuation ship during what was called Operation Hannibal, a massive, chaotic effort to pull German soldiers and civilians out of East Prussia as the Soviet army closed in from the east. On the night of the 30th of January, 1945, the ship left port severely overloaded, packed with refugees, wounded soldiers, and naval personnel far beyond her intended capacity. Nobody knows the exact number of people on board that night, but estimates range from around 9,000 to over 10,000. A Soviet submarine commanded by a captain named Alexander Marinesko spotted her and fired 3 torpedoes. All 3 hit. The ship rolled and sank in under an hour in freezing winter water. Somewhere around 9,000 people died, making it by a huge margin the deadliest single sinking of a ship in maritime history, far worse than the Titanic and the Lusitania combined. And yet, for decades, almost nobody outside of Germany and Poland had ever heard of it, partly because it happened during the collapse of Nazi Germany, and partly because Cold War politics buried the story on both sides. Today, the wreck lies in what is now Polish territorial waters, and Polish authorities have designated it a protected war grave. Diving permits are almost never issued to the public. There have been documented cases of illegal salvage divers and looters trying to sneak down to it anyway, hoping to recover valuables, which has only made the government tighten restrictions even further and increase patrols around the site. Number 3 is the USS Utah, resting upside down in the shallow waters of Pearl Harbor. Utah started her career as a fully commissioned battleship, but by the time of the attack on Pearl Harbor, she'd been stripped of most of her weapons and converted into a training and target ship used mainly for anti-aircraft gunnery practice. On the morning of December 7, 1941, Japanese pilots apparently mistook her for an active warship, possibly because of wooden decking added to protect her from practice bombing runs, and she was hit by torpedoes almost immediately. Utah rolled over and sank in a matter of minutes. 58 men lost their lives, and unlike some of the other ships damaged that day, Utah was never righted and never salvaged. It simply wasn't considered worth the effort, since she carried no major armament and had limited military value at that point in the war. She's still lying capsized in the harbor today, exactly as she came to rest that morning. The wreck is jointly protected as a war grave by the U.S. Navy and the National Park Service, and diving is completely banned for the public. A small memorial platform was built in 1972 so visitors and surviving family members could pay respects from above, but the ship itself, along with dozens of sailors still entombed inside the hull, remains permanently sealed off, and periodic survey dives are carried out only by authorized Navy personnel. Number 2 is HMS Royal Oak, and this one is also in Scapa Flow, the exact same harbour as Vanguard, but the story here couldn't be more different. In October of 1939, just weeks after Britain declared war on Germany, a German U-boat commander named Günther Prien pulled off one of the boldest naval raids of the entire war. Scapa Flow was supposed to be nearly impenetrable, protected by narrow channels and sunken blockships. Prien navigated his submarine through a gap in those defences under cover of darkness, slipped directly into the anchorage, and found Royal Oak sitting there, seemingly safe at anchor. He fired his torpedoes, missed with most of them at first, circled back, and fired again. This time, they hit. Royal Oak capsized and sank in under 15 minutes, and 833 men died, many of them trapped below deck, with no chance to escape in the darkness and cold. The raid was a massive propaganda victory for Germany and a huge embarrassment for the Royal Navy, proving that even their most secure anchorage wasn't safe. Like Vanguard, Royal Oak now falls under that same British military remains law, and diving on her is completely prohibited. But here's what makes her different from every other wreck on this list. Every single year, on the anniversary of the sinking, Royal Navy clearance divers are given special official permission to descend on the wreck and place a fresh white ensign flag on her hull as part of a formal memorial ceremony, sometimes with survivors' family members watching from a boat above. So while ordinary access is banned completely, this is the one wreck on our list where the law makes a deliberate, ceremonial exception once a year for a few minutes before sealing back up again. And number one, the wreck almost everyone on Earth has heard of, but almost no living person has actually seen: the USS Arizona. On the morning of the attack on Pearl Harbor, a Japanese bomb penetrated Arizona's deck and detonated her forward ammunition magazine. And the explosion was so catastrophic, it essentially destroyed the front third of the ship in seconds. More than 1,100 sailors and Marines died in that single explosion, many of them in a matter of moments, and most of their remains are still inside the wreck today. Above her now sits the USS Arizona Memorial, a white structure that spans the width of the sunken hull without actually touching it, visited by well over 1 million people every single year, making it one of the most visited historic sites in the entire United States. And yet, in all that time, almost no living person has ever actually touched the ship itself. It's protected as a National Historic Landmark and a war grave, and diving is banned for absolutely everyone except Navy and National Park Service teams, who descend periodically just to monitor the condition of the hull, because Arizona is still slowly leaking oil more than 80 years later, small dark drops rising to the surface almost every day. People who visit call it the Tears of the Arizona, or sometimes the Black Tears. There's one more detail that most people don't know. Because so many crew members were never recovered, and because the site means so much to the survivors who lived through that day, the Navy has, over the decades, allowed a number of USS Arizona survivors to have their ashes interred inside the wreck after they passed away, placed there by Navy divers in a private ceremony, so that in death they could finally rejoin the shipmates they lost that morning. It's a ship that millions of people stand directly above every year, and that almost no one alive is ever allowed to touch. So that's 5 warships, 5 different countries, sunk decades apart, in completely different ways, for completely different reasons. An accidental explosion, a submarine ambush during a desperate evacuation, a case of mistaken identity, a daring infiltration raid, a surprise attack that changed the course of a war. But every single one of them ended up exactly the same way. Protected not by depth, not by distance, but by law, because these aren't just wrecks anymore. They're graves, and in most cases, the final resting place for hundreds of men who never got the chance to come home. If the law allowed it just once, which one of these 5 would you actually want to see up close? Let me know which one down in the comments, and if you want to go deeper into any of these stories, I've already covered a couple of them in full on this channel, so go check those out next.